Hare Krishna, Jai Prabhupada. Oh, we have all this light behind us. Okay, let's change that. Hold on a second, I have to reorganize here and deal with this effulgence that's behind me. And it's not coming from me. Not yet, anyway. Maybe in the future. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gauda Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Let me just get everything situated. We get it straight. We make it a little lower. I have to get my computer set up. Yes, we are reading from an article which we've almost finished. And I just need to bring it up on my computer. Get my computer within range to read it. We're getting to the end of, maybe getting to the end of the topic. I mean, the topic of self-forgiveness is vast and self-esteem, but I don't know how long you want to talk about it for. I think we've covered many points. Actually, I don't even know if this is on this computer. Okay, give me a minute. I have to figure out where everything is on my computer. I'm oscillating between two computers. I just had my computer in the shop for 2 weeks and solved 2 problems, and the third problem is not solved, and the mouse freezes up. So whenever it freezes up, I have an old Mac that was donated to me. I go to that, and I use that. And guess what? I think I may not have that on here. Let's look. Letter about self-esteem. Oh, I have it. Things are looking good. Okay. Magyana timirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurumeditam yena tasmai sri gurave namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Gauranga. It's a custom when someone sneezes, they say bless you, because there was a time, I believe, in England or America when people who were sneezing had a disease that could kill them. And so it was thought if they were sneezing, they may have that disease. And people said bless you. Like, may the blessings of God be upon you, that you may not die from this disease. And then now when in America, maybe other places in the world, when someone sneezes, people say bless you. So it's nice to get blessings, better to get blessings from advanced devotees. But and generally, we don't give blessings going up, we give blessings going down. But I always joke with devotees that during allergy season, I get a lot of blessings. Because I sneeze a lot, so I get a lot of blessings. So if you want to bless me every time I sneeze, it's okay. And I'll probably will sneeze a lot. Because I'm reacting to allergies. Okay, so we're coming to the end of this article. We had discussed last week about how naturally if you do something wrong you feel bad, but the idea of feeling bad is to motivate you to do the right thing or to improve yourself. And if we have low self-esteem or our psychology isn't healthy, then feeling bad about something could be quite discouraging. And we could feel useless. What's the use it didn't. I failed. What's the use? Why try? Like that. And so feeling bad about ourselves then becomes our enemy. So that's basically the context of what we're talking about, how to be able to adjust feeling bad in a way that we can move forward, be remorseful, and be inspired to improve rather than be discouraged by feeling bad. And we mentioned that, that often we become discouraged if we identify the bad as who we are rather than a character trait or a flaw in an ability or whatever, something we could improve. Then we just work on improving. But if we think that it is our core identity that we're bad, or we're a failure, or we can't do nothing right, or we're not lovable, that makes it really difficult for you. So in psychology they call this core belief. Core belief means like a foundation of belief that governs everything in your life. And if you have a core belief, you'll see that it comes up everywhere, in all kinds of situations, in all kinds of relationships. If you're reacting, if you react in a similar way in all kinds of situations, it's probably because of a core belief. And core belief means it's like a core identity about yourself, what you believe about yourself. So if, let's say for example, you believe you're bad, that core belief then gives you evidence that every time you do something wrong, it gives you evidence to prove that you're bad, and then it reinforces that feeling that I'm bad, which is obviously really disempowering. And it could be very empowering, but in an unhealthy psychology it's disempowering because the concept that I'm bad, its core, it means it influences everything. So, for example, if somebody thinks, if their core belief is I am bad, then if you try to correct them, they'll get very upset because they'll take your correction as a reinforcement that they're bad. And that feeling that they're bad, it's very painful for them. So if you say, you should have done it this way, that would be better, instead of saying, thank you for that advice, say, yeah, that's a good point, they'll react in some way. And basically what they're saying is you think, and you think whatever their core belief is. I'm a bad person, I'm stupid, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable. That's how they'll interpret everything, because it's a core belief, so it affects everything. Oh, so you mean I'm stupid? They may say that to you, or that's how they feel. So, like sometimes, you'll tell somebody something and they'll come back and say, all you ever do is criticize me. But actually it means is all they ever do is criticize themselves. And so you say one thing, and they take it as that, and that one, but maybe you say one thing every few months, and that one thing every few months, could you put your plate over here? 3 months later, the lights are on in the house, could you turn them off because nobody was home when I got back and all the lights were on? That's considered criticism of themselves. And then they'll say, all you ever do is criticize me, I do everything wrong. So it's a core belief, I do everything wrong. That's a very common one. You agree? It's common? I do everything wrong. And then someone says that you've done something wrong, and then your response is, so you think I do everything wrong, or you always tell me I do everything wrong. And they'll say, no, I didn't really say that. That's not what I said. Excuse me. But that's how it becomes interpreted. Isn't it? You understand? Does that make sense? Hare Krishna. Technical problems here. Oh, gizmos and gadgets to record this. So if you look at your life and you see something where something really like nothing big really happened and you had a big response to it. It activated something, some core belief inside about some inadequacy within you. Or a need that you have. Could be an inadequacy or could be a need, and it activated it. And if specifically if you see that it comes up in many situations, or similar things come up in many situations, it's probably because of that core belief. So let's say core belief is everything I do is wrong. Well, number one, you'll probably do more things wrong because you believe that. Number two, as we said, if someone tries to correct you, that'll be interpreted as everything I do is wrong. And so you've probably been in situations where you said something to somebody which you felt was innocent, or you were trying to be helpful, or very light or very gentle, and their response was like a hurricane. And you're looking at that thinking, wow, I just touched a black and blue mark. I put a feather on a black and blue mark and the person is screaming. I'm sure we've all been in that situation. That's because of a core belief that someone has that creates extreme sensitivity to being told that they've done anything that's not perfect, or being told that they're, as I said, being told something that they will interpret as either not being perfect, there's something wrong with them, they're unworthy, unlovable, like that. Especially if, someone feels kind of useless, nobody likes me, everything goes wrong. And then anything you do or say that would give them the idea that you don't like them or things are going to go wrong, then they'll react that way. So you'll see it in other people, and if you see it in yourself, it's a core belief. And then you'd want to ask yourself, well, what belief would I have to be reacting in this way? Like my wife or husband, mother or father, friend, employer, they do something and it really, really bothers me. And now, if it only bothers you with them, that's different. It's not global, it's not universal. It's still a problem. You can probably isolate it, and resolve it. But what's the biggest problem is when it comes up everywhere, because then that's what we call core belief. So if you have a core belief that's disempowering, then you need to deal with that and change it. If you have a core belief that's empowering, then anything goes wrong, anybody says anything, it just doesn't stop you, it doesn't bother you. Or if it bothers you, it doesn't bother you for long, it doesn't bother you enough to distract you from what you're doing. Because you're not relating to what happened or what they said on a core level about yourself. You're not, if you fail and you don't have a core belief that you're a failure, and you have a core belief that I can succeed, then every time you fail, the core belief that I can succeed actually gets stronger. Isn't that interesting? And if you have a core belief that I'm a failure, every time you fail, that core belief gets stronger. I'm a failure. What's the use? Why try? Nothing ever works out. Right? Or core belief that I'm successful, or I can be successful. Every time you fail, then you think it's just information, it's getting me closer to doing what's right, now I know that didn't work. So your psychology has a huge effect, can have a huge effect on your level of determination. Like Nectar Devotion, Rupa Goswami says, Utsahan nishtaya daryat. You should have enthusiasm, you should have patience, you should have confidence. Confidence means faith. We should work with faith that we'll achieve success, Krishna will help us. We should work with patience that it'll happen over a course of time, it takes time. And we should always be enthusiastic while we're waiting. It's one thing to be patient, it's another thing to be enthusiastic while you're waiting. Right? So they go together quite well. Right? So this is an instruction on how we become successful. These are 3 items. He lists 6 items. Those are the first 3, and he said these nourish your bhakti, or these are characteristics which enable you to become successful. So we can see from this that if you have the wrong psychology, it's very easy to get discouraged. So then you're not able to follow this instruction, to be enthusiastic and patient. But you'll tend to just give up. What's the use? I can't be good at anything. Everything I try fails. I'm just a failure. I never succeed at anything, etc. But how will you be enthusiastic, patient and faithful? So, that's why we're giving these classes, just to bring awareness to the fact that even though there's a spiritual principle, and one would think wholly and solely by spiritual strength, by following sadhana, I would be able to be enthusiastic, patient, and faithful, which is true in theory, but if one's psychology if one's core beliefs are firmly grounded in I'm a failure, I'm worthy, I'm not good at anything, then you naturally could be easily discouraged when you fail. So it's something to be aware of. Is that okay? You understand? Yeah. It's just something that I've noticed. And you've probably noticed it also. It's like if we're trying to deal with an issue or a problem and we're looking at it from a philosophical or shastra perspective or through the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, the instructions are the solution. But Prabhupada gives the example of Sukadev and Maharaj Parikshit, that there's a speaker, so the speaker is perfect, but the person who's hearing has to be able to assimilate and act on it. So if there's any problem in the assimilation process, which is due to an unhealthy psychology, that even though the instructions are perfect, the assimilation of the instructions won't be, and then therefore we'll find that the instructions are not helping us. And then we might think, well, maybe the solution is not there in Krishna consciousness. Well, actually, that's not entirely true. The solution is in Krishna consciousness, but the problem is with the assimilator. So, I went to a naturopathic doctor on Thursday. Excuse me. And she put me up to a machine. And she said, I'm low in vitamin B12. And I'm low in this and that. Not so much. And my daughter's been to that doctor and my wife has been to that doctor. And we're all low in different things. I said, how is it that we eat the same diet and we're low in different things? She said, you have a different body. So the diet could be compared to Krishna's instructions, Prabhupada's instructions, the instructions of your spiritual master. So we're all getting the same instruction. But how well can we digest? Now, we could say that digestion increases with advancement, and that's definitely true. The more you advance, the more you can absorb, the more surrendered you are. Tadbidi pranipatena paripashnena seveya. Pranipatena, surrender. Then when you hear, you can actually hear because then you can apply if you're in that consciousness. So definitely in terms of hearing, it must be submissive with the mood of service and surrender. That's the spiritual aspect. And what we're talking about now is there's a psychological aspect. So if the psychological aspect is unhealthy, it could affect the assimilation. So then, using this example, you have good food, bad digestion, and you're not able to assimilate it, or in some cases, it turns poisonous. That's called, what's it called? Amla, I think, or alma. What's that called? Undigested food is the Sanskrit word for it. And it causes disease. So you're eating good food and it's not being digested, and the person next to you is eating the same food and they're healthy and you're not. So if we have an unhealthy psychology, we may take an instruction and it may disturb us. We may not understand it. We may not be able to apply it, as in this example I'm giving, utsahan, nishchaya dayat. I may not be able to apply that instruction because I have a very negative psychology. So how can I be enthusiastic if I'm negative about everything, that'll be difficult. And I could, force myself to be enthusiastic. But it'll be quite, it won't come out right. I don't know if you've ever seen a devotee who's not enthusiastic and not optimistic by nature, trying to be. They're still pretty miserable, even though they're enthusiastic, because they're not really enthusiastic, they're just trying to be. It doesn't work, at least not in the long run. So be aware that application of spiritual principles may be handicapped by unhealthy psychology, especially in hearing instructions which relate to self-purification. So if you're given instruction to improve in a certain area and you have low self-esteem, you'll tend to be very defensive and closed down because it's painful to hear. So your ego will close it down. It can't bear it. It can't bear it. Because I don't know if you've had that experience. It's like your ego is very sensitive, and then you hear an instruction. And the instruction it's rubbing against your ego. And so your ego just closes off so you don't have to hear it because it's hurting you. So one of the ways we close off is deny it. Because if I deny it, then it doesn't hurt my ego. The problem is if that instruction is valuable for you and you deny it, then you can't avail yourself of the benefit of that instruction. So that's a psychological process. And one would think by becoming a devotee that you would become more and more humble, more submissive, more open. But unfortunately, the bad news is, and maybe you already know this, that practicing Krishna consciousness doesn't necessarily guarantee that will happen, because sometimes the execution of devotional service produces weeds, and one of the weeds is pride. So it's possible someone who's executing devotional service could become more proud over time. So we can't make the assumption that wouldn't happen, because weeds are a byproduct of bhakti if one is not careful. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes that when a devotee advances, one of the opulences, he achieves opulences, and people will then honor him or glorify him for those opulences. So he may become proud because of his material opulences. And advanced devotees, they don't want to be pushed forward, they don't want name and fame, they're antagonistic to that. But until one is on a higher level, they may enjoy that, and they may flaunt it. So it does happen, and if that happens, then we can't hear instructions. We've seen in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, I don't know if you're aware of this, but sometimes disciples leave their guru finding fault with their guru's teachings. Now you might say, well, I could understand. Maybe a disciple is a very learned scholar, and his guru isn't, and we're all very similar, it's just our guru is further ahead, but maybe a disciple caught up with his guru and actually went ahead, and maybe he understands the philosophy in a more nuanced way, and he feels that his guru maybe doesn't understand certain things. That seems not proper, of course, but probable, right? Now, does it seem probable if your guru was Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur or Srila Prabhupada, that would happen? That seems unlikely, but it happens, and it has happened, and it will continue to happen. So even on that level, when someone is a follower of Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur or initiated disciple, there are those who doubted his preaching strategy and understanding of philosophy, because Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati didn't do certain things and introduced other things that were not done before by his father, and some people thought it was a deviation. So that just goes to show that just by staying a devotee and chanting Hare Krishna doesn't mean necessarily you're going to become humble. And unless there's humility, you can't hear. Now, some of us by nature are more humble, some of us by nature are more proud. But don't assume that over time you'll become more humble. You may not. You have to work on it. And if you have, I don't know if you understand this or have heard me talk about this, but I mentioned previously that when a person is arrogant, they're always trying to show off what it might be. In Krishna consciousness, they could show off their erudition, that they know a lot, or that they're good kirtaniyas, or whatever. Now, often when a person feels the need to show off, or feels the need to tell you how great he or she is, they have low self-esteem, and what's the word I'm using? They're balancing their low self-esteem with arrogance. That's not the word I'm thinking of. What is the word I'm thinking of? What is the word I'm thinking of? Somebody they feel very low, and they need to feel very high. So they become arrogant because they actually don't think they're great. It's not that every arrogant person thinks they're great. Many arrogant people think they're not great. And they become arrogant to counteract, that's the word, to counteract their feelings. So that's an interesting phenomenon. And if we become arrogant, that's a totally psychological issue. But if we become arrogant, we can't hear. And if we can't hear, we can't progress. So it's unfortunate that an emotional or psychological issue can be an obstacle to advancement, where one by nature is proud or insecure, needs people to honor him. And I may have told you this story, that we had a very talented godbrother, did a lot of service. I don't know where he is now, in Los Angeles, maybe in the late 70s. He was like a technical, scientific guy. So when you needed any kind of technical computer stuff, he was the man. So he was actually invaluable. Or any kind of technical advice or work, he would do it. But we found out that unless he was glorified and honored and felt more privileged than others, he wouldn't do anything. And he would just kind of mope and grope and complain. So as a brahmachari, we would take prasadam, nobody had cushions except him, we'd give him a cushion. And he wouldn't think, why am I the only one with the cushion? He would feel like, this is good, I've got a cushion and I'm being recognized. That's how we had to deal with him. So obviously, that's an obstacle to bhakti, isn't it? That you want to be recognized. That Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, if you try to position yourself within the society of devotees to get recognition, that's actually evil. That desire is evil. To manipulate Vaishnav society so you become recognized, it's an evil desire. Right? He also used the word wicked. In other words, it's a lowly desire. And the interesting thing about it is normally you would equate pride with a lack of spiritual advancement and create humility with increased spiritual advancement, which of course is true. So therefore then we would think, well, if someone has been a devotee for a long time or someone is more advanced, they'll be more humble. But advancement it's not holistic. It's like it's not everything goes up. You may be advanced in one area, like let's say you're very attached to preaching. But it doesn't always mean that on the side of losing your envy or humility or something, it goes up. Your preaching enthusiasm may go up like this, and your humility may go up like this, or your pride may go up with it. It's possible. So don't make an assumption that one is going to necessarily purify the other. In theory, yes, but there has to be the right conditions for that to happen. So if someone like this devotee by nature is proud, it's going to be more challenging for them, especially if they're not aware of it and they don't deal with it. So Anyway, the point was, as Parikshit Maharaj is the example of a person who was hearing, why could he hear? Because he was humble. And if we have any kind of psychological issues that prevent us from hearing, then when we're given good advice, we'll say things like, they don't know what they're talking about, or they have the problem too, who are they to tell me? I don't do that, you know. And then you can't avail yourself of the good instruction, which is unfortunate. And a lot of us have that problem. We just, we don't want to hear any criticism of ourselves. Although we don't mind hearing criticism as long as it's about somebody else. In fact, we like hearing criticism about others. It makes us feel better, right? As long as it's not about us, we're okay. And some of us, unfortunately, are pretty inspired by hearing criticism of others. That's unfortunate. If we're more Krishna conscious, it'll be the other way. We never want to hear criticism of anyone else, and we just want to hear criticism of ourselves so we can improve. So that's kind of the goal we're coming to. So if you notice anything about yourself that's preventing you from being able to hear any problems you're having, or when people point it out, then try to find out, well, what's going on? Why can't I hear? Do I have some core beliefs about myself, and that, I'm a failure, or I failed my spiritual master, I'm not a good devotee. And then somebody tries to correct me, and then in my consciousness it's reinforcing those feelings, and then because I can't stand those feelings, they're horrible feelings. I'll give you an example. Let's say you feel you failed your spiritual master. And how difficult would it be for anyone to say anything about you and your life that in any way would indicate to you that you failed your spiritual master? It would be so difficult. And as soon as you hear it, you'd want to deny it. Right? But what if it were true? And if you heard it and understood it, you could do something about it, and you could resolve that problem. Then hearing, Prabhupada wants you to do this, but you're doing that, and I think you should stop doing that. That would be fantastic if you could hear it. But if due to some sense of ego that you just can't bear to hear anything that you did is wrong, because subconsciously you know it's true, and when you hear it, it just drives you crazy, then you'll deny it, generally. So, that's unfortunate. You agree? That's unfortunate? Yeah, and one of the things I find that's so interesting about this topic is that if you study the topic of humility and false ego from a philosophical point of view, then it's very clear that humility is a byproduct of advanced bhakti. But if you study these topics from a psychological point of view, you can see how the psychological can be a huge impediment. Even though you're making spiritual advancement, if you have an unhealthy attitude towards yourself, it can make it really difficult. See, the point is, a healthy attitude would be that you could write a song like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when I think of others happy, when I see others happy, it makes me unhappy. When I see others unhappy, it makes me happy. You could say things like that and not be inspired. You would just be able to admit that that's who I am, and I need to work on it, and I'm acknowledging that. And Krishna, I need your mercy to help me overcome this. And you could just do that very easily without any false ego. Just accept that, admit that, work on it, pray to overcome it, still be inspired in Krishna consciousness. So that's what we want to achieve. If you can admit a fault, if you can admit to others that I have this fault, and very openly, without pretension, that's a very good sign. That's what it's supposed to be like. That's what advancement is supposed to be like. If you can't do that, if you have a need to show others that you're good or almost perfect or a good devotee or better than them, that's a problem. Whether the need comes from a spiritual lacking or a psychological problem, it's damaging. It's just wrong. And so at least we should be aware, so that's a test. Do you have difficulty admitting a fault, especially amongst equals? If you do, it's a problem. It's not a good sign. Do you not have difficulty? Can you admit your faults? Can you say, I have this ill feeling towards this devotee? Can you admit that to another person? Can you be vulnerable? Can you show that you have defects? If you can, that's good. That's what humility means. It means to be without pretension. So you're not... Do you need to pretend that you're more Krishna conscious than you are? Pretension is Prabhupada talks about it's duplicitousness. You're two things. Do you need to show the world you're something that you're not? Do you need to show the world that you're better than you are? Or can you show the world who you are, be satisfied, not satisfied, but accept it, and ask the Vaishnavas for their mercy to help you? Can you do that? Because that's what humility means. Now, as I said, you may not be able to do that because you're not on that level yet of advancement, or you may be advanced, but you may not be able to do that because your own image of yourself is so low or so weak that you would feel destroyed if people actually knew what you were like. And you need to have an image just to give you stability or strength to deal with the world. So that's not good. Okay. Now it's time to see if there are any questions, and I don't think there are. And if there are not, then I'm going to continue reading. And there's only a few sentences left. That was kind of, we were trying to summarize last week's class. Prabhupada is pleased with our sincerity, not with who we are as persons. We can be uneducated, without skills or much intelligence, and still please Krishna with our sincerity. This is what Prabhupada saw in us. He accepted us not because we had qualifications, but because we were sincerely ready to do our best to serve. And if you are sincere in serving, celebrate the success. So what I'm trying to explain to this devotee is, if you look at what pleases Krishna or what might be considered qualification for pleasing Krishna and Guru, oftentimes those who have low self-esteem are looking at the qualifications in a much different way than our spiritual masters look at them, different way than Krishna looks at them, different way than Shastra looks at them. I'm teaching Nectar of Instruction, and I'm studying a topic called Raganuga Bhakti. And a lot of devotees don't understand it. But Raganuga Bhakti is a practice that's done at a certain stage of Krishna consciousness. It's still a sadhana. It's a practice. And the practice is that a devotee is becoming attracted to Vrindavan, attracted to the residents of Vrindavan, attracted to the feelings of the residents of Vrindavan. And he's developing a desire to have the kind of bhakti they have, and he's feeling maybe attracted to a particular rasa. I know you're thinking, wow, this is elevated. Not that he knows what rasa he's in, but he's feeling particularly attracted. Like, let's say, you just feel attracted to being a manjari, and whenever you hear about Radha's friends and what they're doing, you think, well, it'd be so nice to be that way, to be one of them. And you feel that if you do parikrama and you go to the holy places and hear the leelas. You feel like, I'd like to be part of that leela. So, when you feel that way, you can begin practicing what's called Raganuga Bhakti, where you're internally, when you're serving, you're thinking about your relation within that rasa or following someone in that rasa. So then the question comes up, and this is what relates to what we're talking about, the question comes up, well, when is one qualified to do that? Well, if you start when you still have anarthas, then definitely you're disqualified. And there's sahajiyas who think things like you employ sex in your bhajan, and, because Krishna had gopis, you do that, and all kinds of crazy things. So you have to be free of anarthas to do it. But technically speaking, you're supposed to know who you are in Krishna Lila, because then you could fully meditate on that relationship, who you are. And are you coward boy, coward girl? What are you? What do you do? You're supposed to meditate. That's the real qualification. But then, so you might say, but on the stage of anartha nivritti, you're just starting to get over your anarthas. How could you? You don't know who you are, so how could you do this practice where you're following someone in a particular rasa when you don't even know who you are in a particular rasa? So, a very good answer to this question applies to what we're talking about now. It's said that the qualification to practice Raganuga Bhakti is your greed, that you have a strong desire to experience this mood, we call it bhava, of a particular resident of Vrindavan. Now you might say, well, you wouldn't get that strong desire unless you're at least at anartha nivritti. That's true, you wouldn't. But the point is, you may not have that desire at anartha nivritti or nishta, or you may not even have it at ruchi. But if you have it at anartha nivritti, that's your qualification for the practice, because you have that desire, not because any external qualification. It's just that you have a desire to practice it, and that becomes your qualification. You have such a strong desire, and that makes you qualified to do it. Okay, so how does this relate? Well, in the same way, you could say general qualification for any kind of advancement in Krishna consciousness is your desire for it. You sincerely want it. Because if there was more qualification than that, we'd be turning so many people down, don't you think? You can't become a devotee, you don't have qualification. You can't chant Hare Krishna, you don't have qualification. So we intuitively understand this. That somebody comes, we see they're sincere, we're ready to spend so much time with them, we're ready to teach them to chant, sell them books, to read this, we're ready, go read the Bhagavatam, you'll love it. First day, we'll sell them the Bhagavatam because we see they're sincere, and so we understand. Sincerity is the qualification, that's the real qualification. And so that person may be black, white, big, tall, oriental, whatever, we see through all that. And we just see the sincerity. We see, oh, there's a spark. Let me fan this spark of desire within their heart. Right? So we know this. I'm just explaining it in a philosophical sense. So you may have never looked at it that way. But the qualification for advancement in Krishna consciousness is your desire. It's not, you may think I'm unlovable, I'm a failure, I'm useless, whatever. But that obviously has a bad psychological effect on you, but from the spiritual point of view, your qualification to be Krishna conscious is only your desire. That's all. These other things don't matter. I mean, it matters only because you're getting affected by it. But otherwise it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Krishna doesn't care. You want Krishna, he's ready to give himself. That's all he sees. Of course, if you really want it, you'll practice it. So when Krishna sees you practicing bhakti, despite your disqualifications, he's okay with that. One time, our godbrother Jayananda Prabhu when he was given Gayatri, Prabhupada was, when you get Gayatri mantra, then the spiritual master speaks each word of the Gayatri mantra into your right ear, and then you repeat it. And Jayananda Prabhu, Prabhupada couldn't get him to pronounce the Sanskrit properly. Prabhupada gave up, he said. Krishna understands. So It's if material qualification were important, Prabhupada couldn't have spread Krishna consciousness. And people like Jayananda, he would have said, I'm sorry, I can't make you a Brahmin, you can't chant the mantras. Or, you've all eaten meat, therefore you're useless. Because some of Prabhupada's godbrothers said that. You know, how could you worship the deity? How can you be a Brahmin? You eat meat in this life. Do you know pujaris in Jagannath Puri eat meat? And Lord Jagannath's okay with that. Eat fish, eat fish. Lord Jagannath's okay with that. So, if there's some love, there's some affection, Krishna will accept that. And so, if you ever think Krishna doesn't like you, or you're not worthy, or your spiritual master doesn't like you, or you're not worthy, or whatever, that's all coming from you. It's not coming from them. Believe me, it's not coming from them. And it's important to understand that. You know, you may feel guilty that you failed your spiritual master. That you should feel guilty if you fail your spiritual master. But he is not intentionally making you feel guilty. You think, oh, my spiritual master makes me feel guilty. No, you make yourself feel guilty. I don't know, Krishna, why would he accept me? That's your idea. Because Krishna accepts anyone who tries. Like, we've been quoting this verse, Apichet Sudaracharo. It's from the 9th chapter, 30th verse, I believe. Apichet Sudaracharo. Krishna saying, even someone does really something horrible. But, Apichet Sudaracharo, sadhu eva sama. Consider him a sadhu. Why? Bhajate mama nanyabha. Because he doesn't give up. And he keeps trying. So by Krishna's definition, someone who doesn't give up and keeps trying, they're sadhu. Krishna sees him as a sadhu. Krishna sees you as a sadhu if you don't give up. Despite all your problems, disqualifications, if you don't give up on your bhakti, Krishna sees you as a sadhu. So now, what's interesting, it's in this verse, or in the commentaries on this verse, I believe it was Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur said that Krishna says, I consider this person a saint. And in his commentary he says that Krishna is telling us, or ordering us, that we must see that person as a saint. That's an order for us. So, what's the qualification of a saint? Well, he's a devotee, he may be weak, but he gets back up, he's remorseful, he doesn't give up. He doesn't think, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. No, he thinks, I did something wrong, now I'm going to get back up on my feet and I'm going to do it right. That's how he thinks. So, Krishna says, he's a saint, and I order you to see him as a saint, and if you don't, that's offensive, and if you don't, it'll have a negative impact on your devotional service. So, and the word sudaracharo means really bad activities. Sudur. Dur means bad, and sudur means really bad. And acharo means actions. Like acharya, one who lives by his activities. Sets an example by his actions. Achar, prachar, achar means actions. Suduracharo, really bad actions. Someone who does something really bad. Sadhur eva samantavya, you consider him a sadhu. I consider him a sadhu, you consider him a sadhu. So, sadhus, you are all sadhus because you're not giving up Krishna consciousness. You're all sadhus. You're trying. You're remorseful when you make a mistake. You're a sadhu. So why don't you celebrate that you're a sadhu rather than commiserate in the fact that there's so many things wrong with you? Because, in case you didn't know, there's so many things wrong with everybody. So that's, no news to put to print. It's just the way it is. And because it's Kali Yuga, Krishna's willing to overlook about 90% of what's wrong with us. Prabhupada said, I'm 90% lenient. So basically he was looking We're kind of overlooking about 90% of what we were, and taking that, sincerity, fanning that spark, seeing that, we had that desire. And he knew that that sincerity would be the cause of our advancement in Krishna consciousness. Because if we practice Krishna consciousness, we'd be purified. And that sincerity was energizing the practice. And the practice would purify us sooner or later if we just stayed in Krishna consciousness. So to lose enthusiasm because we feel there's something wrong with us, it's actually not Krishna conscious. Because interestingly enough, if we study the psychology of pure devotion, to feel that something's wrong with us it actually enthuses us. Okay, it may not enthuse you, but it's actually supposed to enthuse us. To be aware of our faults is supposed to enthuse us. And we talked about that last week. So if awareness of your faults doesn't enthuse you, then it's just a psychological issue that you need to deal with it. Or I advise you, I recommend you become aware of it. And lastly, I could guarantee you, no matter how you feel, if you were able to see Srila Prabhupada, you would feel ecstatic. So you could complain that there's so many things wrong with you, and this, that, and the next thing, and nobody loves me, and I'm useless and unworthy, and I hate everybody hates me, and I'm envious of everyone, and I can't do anything right, and not perfect. And you could go on with your list. Well, I can guarantee you, that list would vanish upon getting Prabhupada's darshan. So think about that. All of that would just go, you'd see Prabhupada, and that would be it. You would be ecstatic. So that's the spiritual side of you. This other side, it doesn't help the spiritual side. You could make it maybe help in making you humble, but if it discourages you, what's the point? It's not healthy. It's not something that Prabhupada would recommend. So a lot of devotees will recognize they have this problem, and they'll ask me, excuse me, they'll ask me what to do about it. And maybe, the idea of this course was more to bring awareness to the problem than to give a lot of solutions, although I think I have given some solutions. But some of you may have this problem on such a deep level that you'll need more help than I could give you. And all I would say is, get it. If you believe you have a core belief that you're worthless, you'll never be good enough, you're useless, imperfect, a failure, whatever, definitely get some help. Read some books on it, take some courses online, get some counseling, whatever. Because all we're talking about here is changing a core belief about your identity. And I think from listening to what we've talked about, you can recognize this in yourself, you can recognize it in others, and you can recognize how damaging it is. So we don't want to allow some psychological problem to prevent us from hearing properly from people who could give us good advice, because we already feel that we're failures and they're making us feel more like failures. I can speak a little bit from my personal experience, is that I noticed that people who are not satisfied with themselves, they look for that satisfaction in other people. And because they look for that satisfaction to get it from other people, they're often let down. And they'll often tell that other person, even that person is their guru, how he's letting them down. And he's letting them down in ways which have no correlation to the job description of a spiritual master. These are all expectations which were coming from a person's own emptiness, their own personal lackings, which they were hoping to get from their spiritual master. And when their spiritual master didn't give them, they'll say, you let me down, I thought I could this and that. But that's not what a guru does. So it was coming from their own lacking, that they were depending on him. It comes out in marriages also. Very toxic marriages will be that way. That you'll never be able to live up to the expectation of your spouse because your spouse is empty in many ways, and they need you to fulfill the emptiness that they should fulfill themselves, and therefore they have expectations of you that either are difficult to fulfill or maybe impossible to fulfill, or maybe impractical to fulfill. And so sometimes you'll even see that within normal relationships within ISKCON. And you'll say something to someone and they'll get really hurt. They were already hurt. They were already having a very negative self-image. And you said something, could be a joke, because I've had this experience. It was just a joke. And they took the joke so seriously. So when you're lacking something in yourself, then either you're sensitive to people pointing it out, or you'll expect it from them. And then when they don't give it, then you'll be upset with them. And you don't want that to happen in relation between guru and disciple. It can happen in relation to Krishna. Krishna, why didn't you do this? You're God, you should do this. And you didn't. I don't like you, or I have issues with you. I didn't expect that. That happens all the way up to God. Guru is a representative of God. Happens with temple presidents, GBC. We have expectations. And a lot of times we have expectations in leadership because we can't do it ourselves. We're failures ourselves, and we expect other people to fail in the wake of our failure. And so we project our failure on them. Why aren't they doing this? They should be doing this. Well, we could say, why aren't you doing it? You have more time than they do. But you couldn't. And so you're mad at them for not doing what you know you should have done, but you don't admit that you should have done it. So it becomes problematic. You agree? And a lot of times in relationships between devotees, it's not about issues. It might appear to be about issues, but it's about things which are much deeper. And sometimes they're so deep that we're not even aware of why something has become an issue. You know, sometimes I've spoken to devotees. So we may be discussing a philosophical point, and then at some point I see that they do not have the capacity to understand the point in any way other than they understand it. Because if they understood in any other way, they would have to admit they're wrong. And they actually don't have the capacity to admit they're wrong. They can't. It is a psychological problem. And so sometimes, you know, we're arguing and we're getting upset because of the psychology. Why doesn't this person understand? Here's the point. Prabhupada made it. It's so clear. It's so obvious. What you said didn't take into consideration this point. And once you consider it, you'll see it's different context. And your point's no longer valid. No, I don't accept that quote. That's, you know, how do we know Prabhupada said that? That's just somebody saying he said it, you know. Okay. Everybody knew this, Prabhu, you know, from day one, everybody knew Prabhupada said this. Yeah, but we don't have it written down anywhere, so I don't accept it. You know, like that. So the issues are more psychological than they are either philosophical or practical in many, many cases. So we need to be aware of that about ourselves, and we need to be aware of that about others. And a lot of times, I've mentioned this before, when you see others are frustrated and angry, you just have to understand there are a lot of internal issues going on. And they may say things like they're angry about this and that, but actually they're not angry about this and that. They're angry about the fact that nobody listens to them. That's what, you know, why are they doing this in the temple? This should be done this way. We never did it that way during Prabhupada. And they're criticizing everyone in the temple, the leadership. But actually, if you listen closely, what they may be saying, and most likely are saying in many cases, is, why doesn't anybody listen to me? I know how to run a temple better than this. So that's what's coming out. It's the psychology coming out of feeling not appreciated and frustrated that as a senior devotee, nobody's asking for their input, or there's no facility to give it. So that's what they're saying. So when you understand that, you can better resolve issues. Because what people say externally and what they really say is not always the same. Sometimes it's hard to understand, but A lot of times people complain to me, and I understand what they're saying. It's not what they're saying. They're saying something else. They're feeling, maybe they feel I don't care how they feel. Maybe they feel I don't feel they're important, like that. But they're saying something else. And so you have to look and go, okay, this is what they're saying. You have to translate it. And so sometimes, if you're just arguing externally with what they're saying, you're not getting to the point, and that's why there's no communication. Because there's needs people express. Like sometimes when you're discussing Siddhanta, arguing philosophy, sometimes there's a need a person has in establishing a Siddhanta. There's a certain emotional need he has to fulfill. Like Ritvik, there's definitely an emotional need. There's a strong emotion that no Prabhupada disciple should be guru. It's not philosophical. You can't substantiate it philosophically. But for them it's a need because they believe that's what destroyed ISKCON. Yes, unqualified gurus was destructive for ISKCON, but changing the parampara Siddhanta is not going to help the situation. But for them it's a very emotional issue. That, what's at the crux of this Ritvik issue, that none of Prabhupada's disciples should be gurus, is a very emotional thing of how so many gurus had done things which put ISKCON back like 30 years, and we still haven't recuperated in many places. So, how can you talk philosophical with a person coming from that emotional position? You can't. So you can see even how emotions can get in the way of understanding philosophy. I see this a lot. I'm trying to think of an example. Oh yeah. There's a big controversy about, I don't know if you're aware of it, but there are many changes to Prabhupada's books. And the idea from the BBT is that the people who transcribed and edited in the early days made mistakes. They didn't hear things correctly. In Prabhupada's accent, they left things out. They put things in the wrong place. So we have to change that. And there's Sanskrit editing also, I think. So we have to change that. And there are obvious mistakes. Pitri Loka is a planet, and it was translated as planet of the trees. It's not planet of the trees. Pitri is forefathers. It's planet of the forefathers. So examples like that. I think there's another one where it was translated as the moon, but it was actually demon. Demon. That, he must be saying the moon. Little things like that. So there's a controversy, and there was a meeting about it in Los Angeles, and I was watching it on YouTube. And discussion was going back, pro and con. Don't change, Prabhupada didn't want to change, or just change a few things, and like that. And then some devotees were making the argument that, these books made me devotee, so why do you have to change them? These were the books that raised me. And I could understand there was a strong emotional connection to those early editions of Prabhupada's books, because those were the books these devotees were reading, and they were thinking, we read these books, they made us devotees, and these don't tamper with Prabhupada's books, and I could understand that. And then the moderator was saying, well, but if there's mistakes in it and we present it in academic circles, it's not going to be accepted, it's going to be looked down upon, etc. Which was a logical argument, because there were mistakes that needed to be corrected. So what was happening is that devotees who were sometimes having a very strong emotional response to the changing of Prabhupada's books, maybe too strong, and not enough a logical perspective. Well, what did Prabhupada want? What did he say? Let's look at all these things. Let's take everything into consideration. So that the emotional was getting in the way of actually looking at it logically. So it does happen. So, our emotional nature can get in the way of us being able to reasonably deal with issues. So, it's something to be aware of. And someday, Krishna willing, I want to do like 5-day retreat and just help devotees with these things. So we can we can overcome some of these problems. And I think it would be a great retreat for a temple, to help people work out issues better and understand more why they're reacting to different people and what's going on inside of them and what their core beliefs are. Because I think the temple would prosper tremendously from that. So, that's what I have to say. And I don't know if this was a good class or a bad class, or I put you all to sleep because there were no comments or questions. No comments, no questions. I don't know. Either it was a tremendous class or it was completely useless and boring, and therefore you all fell asleep, and that's why you don't have any questions. But anyway, if you want to ask questions now, please ask. I have a saying that every conflict did not begin with a conflict. It began years ago. It began with how your mother treated you. But when you're having a conflict, it's not starting there. There are issues within us that have started years before. Something else that we talked about sometimes is how some people have issues with authorities, probably because they had very authoritative parents or priests or teachers or brothers or uncles, or some way they got a bad taste with authority. And authorities would tell them to do things they didn't want to do, or very demanding, would punish them. So, naturally, if you had heavy authorities, it's likely you would have issues with them. You wouldn't like authorities, you wouldn't trust them, or you had authorities that cheated you. So then, you come to spiritual life, and then you have authorities. In the temple, you have a spiritual master, you have the authorities. Acharyas are authorities, you have their teachings. So, obviously, if you have issues with authorities, it could be an impediment in hearing properly from authorities. Prabhupada said some things which are hard to accept from a materiological, historical perspective. And it's an authority issue. And Prabhupada said it himself. He said he was on a morning walk, and they were arguing, scientists versus Vedas about so many things. And Prabhupada just stopped and he said, "Look, this all boils down to one thing: who you're going to hear from. You're going to hear from the scientists, or you're going to hear from the Bhagavatam." He said, "That's all it is. It's you could say so many things and talk about all these points." He said, "You were not at the beginning of creation. The scientists were not there. So we're only going to understand this based on where we put faith in, which authority we put faith in, because they can only speculate and theorize. They're not there, and the Bhagavatam presents another perspective. So who do you have faith in?" So if we have issues of faith which have been generated by perhaps being cheated in the past and so forth, it will be hard to believe. It could be, anyway. There's a conversation, it's like Maharaj Ugrasena had something like 4 billion bodyguards, 4 quadrillion. Had 4 quadrillion bodyguards. Why would you need 4 quadrillion? And where would they fit? I mean, if you have 4 quadrillion bodyguards, it's probably you're pretty safe. So the devotee was trying to figure that out, and Prabhupada said, "Don't bother, you can't." And so a good disciple would just say, "Okay, this is a chintya, this is inconceivable, it's a different dimension, I don't understand it." All right. My Guru Maharaj said, "You can't understand it?" "Okay, I can't understand it, that's fine. I have trust in him." So that's how it should be. But if you have trust issues, you may not be satisfied. And this devotee was not satisfied. He needed an explanation. That wasn't good enough. Unless I get this explanation, I can't accept Bhagavatam. And he left, unfortunately. Okay. Can we stop now? Is that okay? Or you want to ask something? Or you want to make a comment? Or what do you want to do? Tell me what you want to do, I'll do it. I know what I want to do. I want to have breakfast. That's what I'd like to do. Do I have your permission to have breakfast? Is that okay? Just give me your blessings, I can have breakfast. And then, yes. Now maybe you're writing. I don't see, I don't see anyone writing. And normally you write, so I don't know if there's something wrong. Can somebody write something? Just say, Hare Krishna. Because I want to see if I'm getting anything. Because if you've been writing, all I can see is that people coming online, but there's nothing has been written. And normally you all write something. So, I don't know. Was that another mystical thing like happened last week where a button is being pushed and now nobody can write? Yeah, nothing's coming up. So that means you were probably writing and somehow or other I'm not able to get it. Okay, no. I'm sorry for that. I don't know what happened. I just thought I was boring you all to death and you all fell asleep. But it looks like if you have sent a message, I certainly have not seen it. I can't see it. So we'll figure that one out. We'll figure that out soon. Why? Now I can write a message. Let's see if I can write a message. I will write a message. Let's see if it comes up. Yeah. My message came up. So does it mean I'm the only one that can write a message? I don't know. Anyway, thank you for watching. This has all been recorded. It will be up on Facebook, my YouTube channel, and also eventually on SoundCloud. And we'll see you tomorrow at 8, because I give another class at 10, so we've changed the timing till 8. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.